Welcome, Kevin, and again, thanks so much for participating in our Leaders Who Care video series.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Anytime. Can't do a Leaders Who Care thing without someone who takes care of corporate soul. You can't do that without somebody like that. So, with that said, please, if you could introduce yourself, tell a little bit about you, and then we'll chat.
Absolutely. So my name is Kevin Horan. I'm the Chief Corporate Soul Officer for JSX. JSX is a hop-on jet service primarily in the southwestern part of the United States, but we are headquartered here in Dallas, Texas, and we do operate here one flight a day, or one flight a week, Dallas to Las Vegas. I've been with JSX for a little over 2 years now. I have a 37-year history career in aviation, working for regional major airlines, global airlines, aviation consulting, and even aviation leasing. So I've touched a lot of it from the operation all the way into human resources, where I settled. And I'm proud to say that with the addition of a stint at a nonprofit, which took me to yet another continent, I've worked on 6 of the 7 continents, doing primarily HR work, which has been an exciting addition to my career.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to have that experience of different cultures and different perspectives, and especially in a world right now where we're trying to figure out how to get along with each other and stuff like that. There's always conversation about what people's why are's and why ours. But I like to ask it a little bit different, actually. And why do you do what you do?
It's pretty simple. I love people and I enjoy solving problems. And that is the nature of corporate soul or human resources. We're there to support people and help solve problems or clear paths for them to be successful. In my opinion, HR's had a stigma for years. I started working in HR when we were still called personnel, and then we became human resources.
I forgot about that name, personnel. That was terrible.
Oh yeah. But even when the name changed, the stigma stayed that human resources was a rule book, and we were there to enforce rules and hire and fire. And I've worked for decades to try and change that, to really have HR be seen as a strategic partner, as being the voice of the people, if you will, that represents the minority organization at the leadership table when you're talking about strategy, when you're talking about change, when you're talking about what's working and what's not working. And really see HR not only be the voice of the people, but also be there as a good corporate partner to the rest of the leadership team, to be a sounding board, to be seen as a neutral third party that you can bounce ideas off and get real honest feedback to help lead the organization into the future.
Yeah, it's a great segue into my asking what I call a push question, and it relates to, it's taken decades, and as you alluded to get leaders to realize that human resources are really critical to everything we do. And that ties right into, the more we align with social impact, if you will, the better it is for the business, the better it is for attracting and keeping, and even having the right people to develop. So with all your engagement with HR, and God forbid we ever call it personnel again, and internationally, and the fact that you've recognized and had been bold enough and brave enough to call it corporate soul, what truly differentiates you? I've kind of given away some of the answer, but what truly differentiates you as one of the leaders who care?
So I think it goes back to my background. It's A, that I'm focused on people, and then B, as you said, being very culturally aware. I was raised to be culturally aware. My father worked in an industry where he was traveling the world, not in aviation, but traveling the world for business, and would take me along with him. So as a very young child, I was spending my summers in foreign countries with people who didn't speak English, and I was learning their language as they were learning my language. And that just opened up from the very start my way of thinking and my awareness that we're not all alike. And then that blends into aviation, right? So I move into the aviation field, which is traditionally very homogeneous. It's or homogenous. It's, we jokingly say, very male, stale, and pale. And at JSX, one of the things that really attracted me was that our mission is to be different. And so trying to bring in and open up aviation to areas that have not traditionally seen representation, be that culturally, be that for women, be that for minorities, be that anything that makes you different, that we're trying to bring in that diversity of thought, because it's that diversity of thought that helps create that next level of an organization. And that's key to us at JSX.
Yeah, you kind of bring up a great point, which I would call awareness. And I remember my grandparents would always say, and it wasn't a slogan, they'd always say with the Kiev accent, as long as we have our health, that's the most important thing. And we have technology still speeding along like crazy. We have a pandemic, which we thought was enough to handle, and it's becoming even still more to handle. And then on top of that, Mother Nature throws the tipping point, which was about to happen anyway, of social justice. So with what you talk about awareness of the importance of learning how to get along, do you see kind of like an awakening, if you will, because we've had more time to think of what's important? And to get to my question, what's going to be our awareness as we go forward when we're at work or when we're at home, and sometimes combined, or just being out in the community with people?
So, I think we're in really unique times. As you mentioned, you take the social actions that have been going on in the face of the pandemic, where everybody is sort of working differently, and it's creating a real challenge. And it's challenging leaders to challenge their belief systems. They're challenged every day by the media, by social events, by our leaders. That has us often thinking, okay, where am I? What am I doing? What should I be doing? And what should I be considering? And then you take that and you put it in an environment that is very closed. The pandemic has forced us to communicate in ways that we've never communicated before, which for some people is very comfortable, and for others they're very uncomfortable doing, right. and takes away that natural ability to connect with people. And so the challenge, I think, that leaders today have is being certain that they're making those connections and staying aware and having those courageous conversations, because it's real easy to stay in your home office and just do what you need to do, as opposed to when you're in a multicultural environment at the workplace and you are naturally running into people and having those conversations. Now we have to actually make time to have those and make certain they happen, because it's just not as natural as it had been in the past.
I think it's a great point, which will lead to my next point. But one comment on that is that as we're home more, we find it is very easy to almost become a hermit, if you will, and almost be afraid, I don't know if that's even the right word, to go out anymore. Not just because of the pandemic, but just we get so reclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. My last trip was in before the pandemic began. My last trip was in early March to actually the Women in Aviation conference in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And it happened just as the pandemic was sort of hitting the news here in the United States. And so it was great. We were with thousands of people, thousands of aviation professionals, mainly women, very diverse background. And I went to that, where that was sort of the end of a cycle of recruiting and conference cycles. So I've been with people for months and on the road constantly. And then I sat and didn't move until June. And I thought I was going to go crazy. But what was really fun about that was that when we did get back out on the road, I had to go out and do some recruiting and training. You so much more appreciated that time that you had with people. And you actually found that you were having more meaningful conversations because you were right there with somebody and you were going deeper than you had gone before. So I find that to be really, really encouraging about the other side of this pandemic. When the world starts to travel and the world starts reconnecting, that I think we're going to find conversations that are going to a whole nother level because people have been so starved for that interaction.
It's almost like I haven't tasted an apple for 5 months and the first bite tastes amazing. Right?
Absolutely.
So we start to appreciate, maybe that's part of what Mother Nature's doing, is telling us there's stuff to be done and you should appreciate what's going on. So that leads to another point. How do you see, what role do you see business leaders who care playing with respect to their talent, their people, and even their customers, their vendors, etc., but in 3 areas of well-being: in their financial well-being, their physical and mental well-being as well? How do you see us having to play that?
So I think it goes back to what we were saying just a few minutes ago, and that is that as a leader, you've got to maintain that global view. You've got to maintain those connections, understand what's going on, which is a challenge in the pandemic. And to do that, leaders have to do a little bit of soul searching, and that is really uncovering those hidden biases that you may have, which are only there because you've not been exposed to something. So figuring out what your own hidden bias might be and creating more knowledge around that, particularly in today's environment where you can't go grab somebody and say, let's go to lunch and talk about it, but creating those opportunities to learn more and admitting, which we saw a lot of in the Black Lives Matter campaign, admitting that they don't know it all. Having that courage to step up and say, you know what, I am a fish out of water on this. Please help me understand. Realizing that it's okay not to have all the answers. I think leaders oftentimes think they've got to have all the answers, and that's okay. You don't have to. That's what sparks the courageous conversations, when you don't have the answer and then you mutually, with somebody from a different background or a different upbringing or a different series of thoughts, you come to that more entrepreneurial, more courageous answer at the end, and you show yourself as a human. You're not sitting up there on a pedestal. You're human like everybody else.
And I find it, like one executive told me, it's actually less exhausting.
It is. Once you realize you don't have to have all the answers, boy, life becomes a lot easier. And I think a lot of new leaders, I talk about this when we do our internal leadership training for new managers and supervisors. I talk about that leader syndrome, where if you don't have the answer, you're a failure. And so sometimes you make bad decisions because you feel like you have to. And once you realize you don't have to have all the answers, that you have a team that you can count on, your colleagues have things in the background that you can go to make a better decision, life gets so much easier. And you enjoy work so much more.
And you get buy-in.
Absolutely.
People feel they've been trusted. If a coach, it's the Jerry Jones syndrome of Dallas type of thing. If the coach feels he's really in charge, it's his team. Mm-hmm. It's his team. If the coach is told by the owner, if you don't do well this year or you don't do this, that, you're fired. You don't even think about the future. You're just thinking about, oh my God, and you don't feel like you're part of the team. So I think you're smack on with all of that. What do you see this moment in time is, if there, to make real dramatic change in our systems and how we engage with each other? We've kind of talked about it, but do you see dramatic change actually happening?
Dramatic's a tough word. Dramatic to me means, complete 180-degree change. I don't think we're there yet, but I do see significant change happening. I think people are now realizing, as we talked about earlier, the value of that human connection. By having it taken away from you for a few months, you now realize how important it is to really connect with people. I think people also learning the value of communication, both written and verbal. Because in a lot of situations, you're not getting the nonverbal. And, statistics tell us that most communication happens from nonverbal, not so much what you're saying, how you're saying it, or where you're saying it. And now, in an environment where sometimes you can't see that person, Zoom is a great platform because you can see somebody, but not everybody uses Zoom. Some people are just doing good old-fashioned conference calls. People are having to learn how to better communicate when like me, I talk with my hands all the time. How do you still get your idea across convincingly? How do you interject into a conversation when you can't raise your hand and say, wait? So it's challenging people both on the connection side, but also in how we communicate and the value that goes with that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And speaking of old-fashioned, I actually got a letter from a client the other day thanking me for something, but it was kind of very cool getting a letter.
Absolutely.
So that was dramatic, I guess, but it was really it was always more personal, So absolutely. Great. Hey, thanks for participating.
Oh, my pleasure. Really enjoyed it, and it's been an interesting conversation. Thanks for challenging me to think about these things. I appreciate it.
Anytime. You too.